ISK Legacy, this is our Week 10 review. We can take a look at the NFL that was, the tight matchups, the not-so-tight matchups in our league, but the implications therein. Before, though, just two quick notes. Number one, quick thanks. I know not everyone knew I was doing this, but for those who did know, thanks for the levels of support. I can say that even if you are a conspiracy theorist, that Marathon the Town is 42 and change kilometers from the stadium in Athens, unless my GPS watch is in on the gag. It was hella tough. If you're going to ever try and do it, do some hill training, do yourself a favor. But afterwards, while I was nursing my quads and my pride, beer does help, but so does football. I was able to lie back in the bed in Athens and watch as much as I possibly could handle, which was fantastic. So we will get to the recaps and reviews. One quick note, though. I know we are not a league that likes to trade a whole lot, and obviously ads and drops will be available for the rest of the year, as always. But I do believe our trade deadline is this weekend. So there are some trade proposals out there. I know because I've sent some of them. Reply to them now or reply to them never. So you've got a couple days to work with those. So just bear that in mind. Anyways, like I said, Week 10 was hella exciting, and there are some huge implications for our league. So let's get right to it with the NFL recap for Week 10. Week 10 was in the books. It was an exciting one, not just because I ran until everything hurt and then tried to watch as much football as I could while also maybe enjoying an adult beverage or two. So my memories might be a little foggy, but even looking back, the amount of games that were exciting came down to last possession. In fact, 7 different games came down to our field goal kicker. 8 different field goals if you count Denver and Buffalo twice, which obviously if you were watching the game, you know what I'm talking about. Kudos to Russell Wilson. He brought the 12th man from the stands in Seattle and somehow got him to be on the field in Buffalo. Quick side tangent on that one. If you've been sending me comments or liking, subscribing, whatever, it is super helpful. I love seeing that people like this. Some people have been sending me personal comments. I did get a couple last week asking, what exactly did you cut out in your Arthur Smith rant when you ranted for so long anyway? I hear you. I'll circle back to that at a later date. I'll try to include that. But it is interesting with coaching staffs. I mean, one of the things that I can point to with Arthur Smith, and I already did, his win-loss record over the last couple of years has not been fantastic, and yet he is still a coach. So obviously he is meeting Atlanta's expectations. I say this because Buffalo's offensive coordinator was the scapegoat and apparently was not meeting their expectations and was just let go. I don't think you can blame him for all the reckless interceptions from Josh Allen because he's always done that. But you probably can blame him for having the 12th person, or at least someone had to, so he went down for that one. That aside, with those many close games, we saw a few things that I wanted to point out before we move on to our matchups. One, we saw a few classics, so some things that I think are vintage. Number one, it was great to see Jameis Winston out there. I don't want to get into his problematic personal life, but him as an NFL quarterback in this league just brings joy. He is reckless. It's like he's on bath salts. I don't understand how he thinks he can make every throw. He makes some of the most horrific interceptions you're going to see, but then comes up with some superhero touchdowns. I know Olave's probably a fan. So it's fun to see him on the field again. Sad that it was at an injured quarterback's expense, but they get a bye week in New Orleans, so who knows. Another very classic Keenan Allen game, if you were watching. Yes, you could read a stat line, 11 catches, 175 yards, 2 touchdowns, but if you were watching the game, I think he went out of the emergency tent at least 3 times. That, to me, is the key of a classic Keenan Allen game. We're seeing Pittsburgh going back to form. This is their second time in the last 3 or 4 years where they've had a team that nobody is scared of, nobody considers good, and yet they're poised to make the playoffs. They have as many wins as they do touchdown passes, and yet somehow they're just winning games. I think another classic for me would just be look at the anemic offense of the Jets. Sorry, New York fans, I know you were hoping for something different with Rodgers, and we'll see how that goes. Apparently, he's against vaccinations, but not against other medical treatment to try and get him to recover faster, or maybe his injury wasn't as bad. We'll put that aside because right now the Jets offense is anemic at best. 23 total field goals this year and 10 touchdowns. So if you don't have the field goal kicker from the Jets, I don't blame you because 23 is okay, but there's other teams that have more field goals. But the 10 touchdowns, yee. I think as well, the other position I would want to highlight, Netflix did a great job of pointing out some of our best. Now, Mariota, not so much, but they were showing the journeyman and Cousins and obviously Mahomes. We're getting a whole different quarterback experience this year, though. Number one, and I'm saving some of these stats. I'm going to do something near the end of the year just for overall trends, etc. about the year. But if you were paying attention, as of right now, heading into Week 11, Josh Dobbs in most standard quarterback scoring fantasy systems has more points than Patrick Mahomes. unreal. He wasn't even supposed to start. It wasn't a given that he was going to start. So, and now he essentially lost his job to the quarterback coming back, gets traded, doesn't miss a week, and just keeps on. So we'll see how fast that goes. But I think in general, most of the quarterbacks have had up and downs. Like Lamar Jackson is a top 5 quarterback in most scoring systems, but has had horrible weeks, including this past one. Josh Allen lost a lot of people their leagues. I can testify to at least one of those situations by throwing so many picks. And remember, if you're actually watching the game, he had a pick overturned. It could have been even worse. But the classic I would love to point out is I've been kind of dropping them occasionally, but just to give you maybe a cheap sheet, we have the potential for more interesting quarterback nicknames than I think we ever have. Now, the last couple of weeks in Chicago, unfortunately, not unfortunately, I think Fields is coming off and he might be back this week, or certainly if not this week, next. His replacement being Teabag, I've been using that for the last couple of weeks. I'm pretty happy with that one. Las Vegas have an AOC. I think that's a phenomenal nickname. Doesn't actually translate to either one of those people very well, but well done there. Very big into Tennessee, now starting the rookie. Billy Jeans. Fantastic. Can't even make that up. The Jets, when it's tough, because Zach Wilson gets made fun of a lot, let us not forget what he was first famous for and his first mini controversy of being a mother lover or a mother's friend's lover, but mother lover is a better nickname. Indy, I've always called him the golden mustache, even though it's dark. I don't care. It's a beautiful mustache. I don't want to hear anything about it. The Washington C words, maybe not really a great nickname with Sling and Sammy Howell, but I like it. It rolls off the tongue quite nicely. I've heard some call, I don't really know Game of Thrones, but Littlefinger from Pittsburgh. I think it's just because he's got small hands. I don't know if that was actually a character trait. I think it's just really Pickett's got small mitts. One of the weirder ones, because we currently have the starting quarterback for the New York Football Giants, who I've already mentioned, the Goodfellas reference, so it's hard. Joe Pesci can't be a nickname when your name is Tommy DeVito. You go by Tommy DeVito. But there's got to be something here. He still lives with his mom, and as someone from Italian descent, a quarter Italian, move out, man. You're a starting quarterback. Just don't meet that mid-30s Italian man living with his mom. Break the trend. Let's move out. And of course, like I mentioned, it's good to see Kyler Murray back. Saw some references from being called to duty. If you know his video game history, if not, take a quick Google. It's a fun bit. He doesn't believe in film, just playing video games. And Call of Duty, he's apparently quite addicted to. Can't make this up. He comes back on the week that the new game is actually released. I also can't shake it. Some people that I follow, Craig Horvath, from Fantasy Football Pod, did point this out. And now that I say it, if you don't want Kyler Murray wrecked for you, don't listen to this part, but he referenced this about a year ago, how when Kyler Murray scrambles, he's running like a 2-year-old toddler who stole your cell phone. Just watch it. Tell me what you think. I can't get it out of my head. The last, and maybe the most controversial, because it is a bit of a theory. It is certainly not something we can prove. Same group of people in that podcast point out that maybe Goff can't poop on the road. He might be a nervous pooper. The reason is he's always been horrible on the road, but great at home. And yet he just had the greatest road game of all time. But it's because it was back in Los Angeles and he owns a house close by. So maybe he could poop in his own bathroom, and that's what made him have a great game. Could you imagine if that's been holding him back all these years, is he's just so uncomfortable on the road that he can't go to the bathroom? So, making the American Pie reference and shit break has got to be something that sticks if we can ever prove that. Either way, Week 10, eventful for other reasons, which we're going to get to. A lot of interesting touchdowns and thread lines, but that's going to be more for our matchups. Looking ahead to Week 11, we got a pretty exciting one, and I hope people are looking forward to actually watching this one. Now, bye weeks, you do have to be cautious of Atlanta, Indy, New England, and New Orleans. Not quite the bye-a-palooza that last week was. But one of the most exciting things, I'm going to miss being in North America this week because the night games are actually quite interesting. You got Cincy at Baltimore, which is a decent Thursday night game, especially if you consider the last couple. In fact, the AFC North is playing each other as well, so Pittsburgh, Cleveland during the day on Sunday should be good. Couple decent ones, couple good matchup games. You got the ones that could be quite pivotal and all that, but the night one of Minnesota at Denver, it's not exactly two teams I would love to watch, but you can't tell me that you know what's going to happen in that game. After what Dobbs has been doing in Minnesota, and then Denver just took down Buffalo, legitimately anything can happen. But obviously the big game on Monday night for actual football fans, repeat of last year's Super Bowl, Philadelphia, Kansas City, going to feel pretty crappy that I can't watch those ones. But as I say, let's wait for Week 11. We'll get excited in a minute. First, let's take a look at what happened in Week 10 fantasy-wise. Another monster week by Gene, really showing that he deserves to be in that top spot. He's picking away with the point value. Keep doing it, and you won't need the win. You can pass him on points alone. But Gene, again, stays on top, keeps on top, 200 plus. Now, Kent, you've put 200 on people this year, I believe more than once, so you now know the other end of what it feels like. Taking a look at you first, I mean, you had Kincaid, who was in our top 5. He was our tight end 4. Dallas's defense obviously underperforming for you. Your quarterbacks had to be a disappointment. Watson, maybe not so much, just hitting your predicted against Baltimore's D is probably all right, but Allen against Denver's D, I mean, so many teams have run up and scored against them. You were hoping for maybe a Miami-style performance. You didn't get it. But let's celebrate where you can. Gus the Bus kind of stopped a few stops short, but Williams was obviously a great play. 21 is nothing to sneeze at running back wise. On your bench, though, you did leave Cooks, who was our wide receiver 3, and you do get Fields back next week with your Hill sandwich, so here's hoping things bounce back for you a little bit. Gene, what can we say, man? I mean, Godwin underperformed for you, and your defense did about what they should. And I guess you can argue Mixon didn't have a great game, but not massively underperformed. Even Taylor got you a touchdown, so he's fine. If that's like the low point of your week, because so many other people went off for you. You had TJ Hawkinson, who was number 1. CJ Stroud, who's getting MVP votes, apparently now out of nowhere. Herbert was our quarterback 2 and had a monster game. Allen was our wide receiver 1, and that's in a week, as we're going to see, a few wide receivers went off. So huge, apparently, if you're flying through LA, you need to catch that San Diego connection. Every time they scored on that game, you must have been smiling big. And if you were watching that game, both teams were scoring early and often, what actually helps you out, because obviously neither team really wants to stop. They were the Rainbow Road of this week, so you got 2 big horses in on that one. Congratulations. So as we move forward, and I should also mention, you did have some points on the bench, but you definitely didn't need them. 200 is fine, Gene. You don't need to take any more than that. You can rest easy. Here's hoping I don't bump into Gene next week or anytime soon, because he is on a vicious run. I believe that is it 6 wins in a row now? We'll check when we get to the table, whether it's 6 or if I've missed one there. But either way, keep the momentum rolling, your steam rolling to hopefully the top of the league. Kent, you're going to have to do some work here. You're a couple games out of the playoffs as of right now, so not over yet, but you know you're going to have to rebound and have a better week 11. As I'm lying there in Athens in pain, just kind of nursing my leg. Well, let's be honest, I had a couple drinks in me. I was feeling no pain. But this is one of the matchups that as I was watching, I came out of the gate, I looked pretty good. It looked like I was going to be fine, and then all of a sudden, I wasn't fine anymore. Little bummed about McCaffrey. You got to be worried about this, man, because, I mean, he did well. He broke his touchdown streak, but they're up by 30. Their starters are out, and they got him, giving him carries and love to try and get in that end zone. Got to be careful here. They always complain at the end of the year he breaks down, but here's hoping for you he breaks down in the actual playoffs and not in our playoffs. So he did fine for you. Running backs you got to be happy with Najee. Certainly Lockett had a performance you're going to want to see out of him. He was just outside of our top 5. San Francisco, though, our number 1 defense, and I think that's when I really started to notice things going south for me. I had the number 3 defense on my bench, and we'll talk about my bench in just a second, so this was going to be the battle of the defenses. Unfortunately, it was not. You did have Shipwreck in Detroit, who had the home in California, or not California, LA, we'll say, just outside of when he played for the Rams, but probably stayed in. It's close enough for the San Diego game. And then you had Chase coming out, not a top 5, but just outside. That was kind of your general theme. Jake Ferguson, though, similarly, he was our tight end 6. You had a lot of people who are 6, 7 scorers, but do it enough, and you don't really have that drop off. I mean, Hollywood Brown dropped a 50-yarder that could have been a touchdown, and that would have changed his trajectory, but he was really your only disappointment. Taking a look at your bench, you did just fine. You had some buys and things that you were working through, but you made obviously all the right decisions. Whereas if you look at my bench, I left the defense number 3 and the running back 1 on my bench. I thought he might have an okay game against Seattle. Didn't think it'd be that good. But taking a look at me before you yell and throw at me too much, I just have a ton of running backs. I don't get it. I am throwing out trade requests to people. I'm not getting a lot of answers, let alone yeses or nos. I got a lot of depth in the position right now. I'd like to take advantage of it, but if you don't want running backs, I guess they're overrated because I should have played Robinson, but it didn't burn me that much. My receivers were great except for Watson, who apparently sucks. And I was a little disappointed in Jackson. It's part of the reason why I didn't put Cleveland in there. I don't like having my defense go against my quarterback because I find it's counterproductive. But in terms of my wide receivers, Brown did actually crack the top 5. He was our wide receiver 4 this week. So that kind of sets me back. I did fall a little bit there now in terms of just my momentum and keeping pace. Now Maxon is 1 place below me, 1 game behind me, so I still have 1 in my pocket. Here's hoping I can bounce back next week. Maxon, keep it up. We're both in the playoffs right now. Let's see. Knock on wood, buddy. We can play nice with each other. Maybe we can both keep it that way, but let's see how it rolls. Wish you luck going into week 11. Sticking with our top 4 and then looking a little bit at our bottom, we had Connor and Seamus again. I mean, you didn't put up the number 1 this week, but 161 is going to win you most. You did just fine. Rennie is unfortunate. You actually would have beaten a ton of teams. I know what it feels like. I think I would have beaten about 6 other teams as well myself, but it just matters who you play. So taking a quick look, Connor, Seamus, you had our, weirdly enough, 43.5, but it was still our wide receiver 2. Big week for some wide receivers. You got to be happy with Gibbs in that game as well. I've mentioned it a couple times already. The Chargers and Detroit matchup is quite strong, and if you took anyone, you probably were pretty happy. Gibbs was our running back 3 in that one. Your quarterbacks overperformed. So obviously my shots at your quarterbacking in the past didn't really impact you at all. Now you did have some, Andrews didn't really step up. Buffalo's D did not look like I think most of us thought it would against Denver. And certainly Diggs must have disappointed you on Monday night, but you didn't need it, and you made all the right calls. Rennie, you're obviously looking at you just before we get to your actual team. You were dealing with some massive bye week issues. So the fact that you overperformed on your bye week, I think is pretty good. Unfortunately, your lows were just too low here. Justice Hill just burnt you after a couple of decent weeks there. Got to be happy with your quarterbacks, though. Joey Burrow looking back to where he was before, and Dax was our quarterback 1, 400 plus 4 in the air, 1 with his feet. That's nothing to sneeze at. So I think with you getting some people back that are quite pivotal, and hopefully you can get a little bit of stability in the running back, you can make a push to at least get out of the basement. I know that'll mean something to you, versus our number 1 who kept his spot against Gene, who's pressing, man. So you're going to want to not just win on the way out. If you want to keep your spot, you're going to have to keep scoring points. Riding high on his win streak, Dibbler is not taking it easy, and actually this is quite a pivotal loss for Woody. He is right on that edge of the playoffs, trying to scratch his nails on the way in. So this one is quite an impactful one. Also, one of our closer ones. I know it doesn't look like that. I'll get to that in our closest one, which is next. But let's take a look at how things went down. Jeff, your quarterbacks, and they have not always been your strength. Massive, both in our top 5. Gino was number 3. Purdy was number 5. Huge outings there. And it was also helped. Kittle was our tight end 2. And Monty, weirdly enough, our running back 5, meaning both Detroit. I keep saying Detroit and the Chargers. They were just like, ATMs, not slot machines. They were just paying out every time. Monty was our wide receiver 5, while Gibbs was 3. So that's both running backs in our top 5 this week. Did have a few disappointments. Samuel and Etienne, I'd say Etienne being the big one. He's been kind of your workhorse recently, him having a little rough one, but I guess against San Francisco's D, it tends to happen. Taking a look at your bench, yeah, you had some options there, which is nice. You also were struggling with some bye weeks, as the rest of us probably were. But looking over here, Woody, this is where it was, right? Buyapalooza. If you could sneak one out with both quarterbacks out, with a key running back, who obviously I know there's some hurt issues there too, and probably the best actual wide receiver in the game on the bench, you made it closer than maybe it needed to be. Now, you didn't quite hit your predicteds. Heineke probably hurt you on that one, although the Dobbs stopper, huge pickup. Looks like he's been doing quite well for himself. Aside from that, I mean, you had Eckler's good performance, but he was meant to have one, and I can't keep saying it enough that people who had those players in those games, in that game, would have loved it. But Juju not doing what he should, Barkley having an underperformance, ultimately it just kind of added up to a disappointment. So, Jeff, how long do you want to keep this win streak for, buddy? I think it's 3 games and counting right now. You're certainly not counting yourself out, and you are not out. If you know Matt here is only 1 game ahead of you, and he's right on the outside in, you're more than enough to make a push. Just got to keep the momentum going. Woody, can't afford these losses, buddy. You're going to have to bounce back in week 11. So weirdly enough, this being within about 13 and change, this was like a brothel. There was no tight ones this week. All of them were pretty much blowouts. Timmy, you won the battle of the middle school. Marco, unfortunately, that means you fall to 2 and 8. And Tim, you were in that aforementioned kind of tight region in the bit there. That's in that 5 win, just on the outside looking in. So what's funny, Timmer? We made fun at the beginning of the year with you and your quarterbacks. And you killed it on quarterback again this week, all right? Slinging Sammy Howell was our quarterback 4. Mayfield was out of our top 5, but hey, 20 points from a quarterback in this league is not too shabby. Boyd, with Higgins out, he stepped up. Kind of ended up being with Chase, the second head of that snake. And that was enough to get you through because you definitely had some underwhelming performances, including a healthy bagel from Dotson, which is a rarity, but it does happen on occasion. Baltimore also was our 5th rated defense. Now, you did leave Warren on the bench, who would have helped you out. He was randomly, I know Najee also had a decent game, but Pittsburgh just loved running. So that gives you some options moving forward as you keep trying to push through and crack into the playoffs. Marco, buddy, you're having some bad luck. Your wide receivers did just fine. Adams looks like a person again, maybe, but it all depends again on who's running. Really, the big one for you, again, it's Pollard. This season is just a constant kick in the nuts for you. I apologize for that. Love came out. You finally got some love this week. Had a great game. Well, for him, a great game. Couple of touchdowns. Unfortunately, the golden mustache did not hold weight. Whether it was the flight over, maybe it was the brats, maybe it was the New England defense, but nothing really happening for you there. Did leave some love on the bench. Don't know how much it would have helped out Foreman. Maybe instead of Connor, could have gained you a few points there instead of Madsen, who did get his bell rung and got taken out. That would have actually, let's do the quick math here, that was about, that might have done it. 13 points. That could have almost been enough if the Foreman over Madison pick. But again, ifs, buts, candy, and nuts. And hindsight's 2020. There's 2 cliches back to back. How do you feel about that? Marco, you're not actually statistically, you're not out yet. It tells you if you are, and if you go on a run, it's still in the works. You might have to shake things up a little bit and see what happens. Timmy, again, I think this has been the position you've been in the last couple of weeks. You kind of go up and down. Going to need a couple in a row if you want to crack that top 4. I mentioned it enough, so why don't we actually just take a quick look? Love that, Maddie, that you're out of money, but also you're almost at 40 moves. Chef's kiss. Well done, sir. This is what I'm talking about with the log jam in the middle here. Every game's going to matter. Points for and against are definitely going to be mattering. So keep an eye on that and who's in front of you or behind you, or how that all works out. It's going to, no crying later if you weren't paying attention. Moving on to our matchups, as we all know, it's who you play, not what you do, or maybe it's a combo of both. So all that pep talk I gave Rennie, maybe just wait till week 12, then you can start caring. We got the battle of the win streaks. Okay, our 2 hottest teams in Jeff and Gene going at it. We'll see how that works. Rushki, you got our top one here. You'd be doing the pool a favor, not just yourself, if you manage to take him down. Then we got some interesting matchups in the middle here, right? We had some teams that are on the outside in, like Marco, that needs to go a run against Maxon. Probably the most interesting in terms of just league matchups in rankings are 5 and 6 going after each other to see how things fare. The European games are done for a year, so we have 1 week of a normal schedule before we mix things up. I think in week 12, I think it gets Thanksgiving-y, or is that the next week? I can never remember with you crazy Americans. I think it's next week, week 12. Then we'll get to that. But, gentlemen, enjoy week 11. Make sure we're making our ads drops. Respond to trades. I mentioned in the intro why. And best of luck for week 11.